Stop scrolling. If you have any old coins lying around your house, this video could change your life. Today I'm going to show you 3 Lincoln Wheat Pennies from 1953, 1957, and 1958, and I will tell you why one of these coins could be worth 100, even 1,000 times its face value. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to check your own coins. Let's get started. These are Lincoln Wheat Pennies, one of the most popular collectible coins in America. They're called Wheat Pennies because of the 2 wheat stalks on the reverse side. This series ran from 1909 to 1958, and one of my coins is actually from that very last year, 1958. First up, we have the 1953 penny. You can clearly see Liberty and In God We Trust stamped on it. Now here's something important to check: the mint mark. If there's no letter, it was made in Philadelphia. If it has a D, that means Denver Mint, and an S means San Francisco Mint. The mint mark is located just below the date. The value of 1953 pennies really depends on condition. In average condition, it might only be worth a few cents, but if the coin is uncirculated, its value can jump into the dollars. Next, let's talk about the 1957 coin. This is also a Lincoln Wheat Penny from one of the final years of this series. The design is the same, but the mint and condition of each year's coins is what really determines value. Sometimes these coins even have a doubled die error, where letters or numbers appear printed twice. And error coins like these are extremely valuable to collectors. And here's the most special coin of all, the 1958 penny. This was the very last year of the Wheat Penny series. Starting in 1959, the design changed to the Lincoln Memorial reverse. That's what gives 1958 coins their historical significance. If this coin is in good condition, or if it has a rare minting error, its market value can be significantly higher. So the real question is, how do you know if your coin is valuable? Check these 3 things. Date. Older coins tend to be rarer. Mint mark. Coins with a D or S mark are sometimes rarer. Condition. The cleaner and less scratched the coin, the higher its value. And if you notice any doubling or errors, definitely get that coin checked by an expert. So those were my 3 Lincoln Wheat Pennies from 1953, 1957, and 1958. If you have old coins like these too, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and in the next video we'll talk about the rarest pennies in the world that have sold for millions of dollars. See you in the next video. And don't forget to check your coins until then. Let's begin with the 1953 Lincoln Wheat Cent. If you found one of these today, the first mistake would be to look only at the date and immediately decide that it is either worthless or extremely valuable. The truth is somewhere in between. The 1953 Lincoln Cent is not considered one of the great key dates of the Wheat Cent series, but collectors still pay attention to examples that have exceptional condition, attractive original color, unusual minting characteristics, or collectible varieties. And this is where your inspection becomes important. The first thing you want to identify is the mint mark. Look underneath the date on the obverse side of the coin. If there is no mint mark, that generally indicates Philadelphia production. If you see a D, the coin was made at Denver. If you see an S, it was made at San Francisco. That tiny letter can make a difference because collectors organize Lincoln Cents by date and mint combination. 2 coins can both say 1953, look almost identical to someone who isn't familiar with coins, and still have very different collector interest. The next thing you need to look at is condition, and this is where many people misunderstand old pennies. Simply being old does not automatically make a coin valuable. A 1953 penny that spent decades in circulation may have scratches, worn lettering, a flattened portrait, damaged edges, dark surfaces, and heavy wear. Another 1953 penny could have spent most of its life protected inside a collection or storage container. That second coin could look dramatically different. Collectors often use grading systems to describe the amount of wear and preservation a coin has. On a circulated example, the highest points of Lincoln's portrait will usually show wear first. Details in the hair, cheek, jaw, coat, and surrounding lettering become less sharp as the coin passes through decades of circulation. On the reverse, you want to study the wheat ears. Remember that these are wheat cents. The reverse shows 2 wheat stalks surrounding the words, 1 cent in United States of America, with E pluribus unum above. That design was used from 1909 through 1958, And that final date is extremely important to the story of the series, because 1958 was the last year the wheat reverse was used for regular issue Lincoln cents. So when you're holding a 1953, you're not simply holding an old penny. You're holding a coin from the final decade of one of America's most recognizable coin designs. But let's talk about value. A normal circulated 1953 Lincoln wheat cent is generally not a coin you should expect to sell for hundreds or thousands of dollars just because of its date. That is an important reality. Online videos sometimes make every old penny sound like a jackpot. That's not how the coin market works. Collectors care about rarity, demand, grade, variety, color, and authenticity. For the 1953 issue, high-grade examples and certain mint mark varieties can become much more interesting. Current pricing references show substantial differences between ordinary examples and well-preserved or specialized varieties. For example, 1953D, repunched mint mark varieties are separately recognized and can carry premiums depending on grade, gray sheet. And that brings us to one of the most important things you can learn from this coin. Never stop your inspection at the date. Look at the mint mark. Look at the letters. Look at the numbers. Look at the entire surface. Look for unusual shapes around the mint mark. Look for signs that a letter may have been punched more than once. Look for doubling that appears as genuine separation rather than a flat, shelf-like edge. And be careful. Machine doubling and die varieties are not the same thing. This is one of the biggest traps for beginning collectors. A coin can show strange-looking lettering because of the minting process without being a major collectible variety. So if you see something unusual on your 1953, don't immediately assume you've discovered a fortune. Photograph it. Compare it with reliable references. And if the feature looks genuinely important, have the coin examined by someone experienced in Lincoln cent varieties. Another major factor is color. Collectors commonly describe copper coins using three broad color categories: brown, and red. A coin that has maintained a attractive original red color can be significantly more desirable than a heavily circulated brown example, especially when the coin is also in a high grade. But once again, don't confuse color with rarity. A red coin isn't automatically rare. A brown coin isn't automatically worthless. The entire combination matters. Condition matters. Strike matters. Surface quality matters. Color matters. Mint mark matters. Variety matters. And the buyer's demand matters. Now look again at the coin in front of you. The design may look simple. Lincoln on the front. Wheat ears on the back. 1 cent. That's it. But think about what was happening in America when this coin was made. This was the early 1950s. The United States was living through a completely different economic and technological era. Cash was still central to everyday life. A penny could be handled countless times. It could sit in a cash register, travel through stores, fall into pockets, move through vending machines, and eventually disappear into a drawer. The coin you have today may have been touched by hundreds of people. It may have purchased something. It may have been carried in a worker's pocket. It may have sat in a child's coin jar. We don't know its personal journey. And that unknown history is part of what makes old coins fascinating. But there's another reason collectors like the wheat cent. It represents the end of an era. The Lincoln cent itself began in 1909, and the wheat reverse continued for nearly half a century. The design eventually gave way to the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959. That means in 1953, wheat cent is getting closer and closer to the end of the classic wheat era. So if you find one, don't throw it away just because it doesn't look perfect. Put it aside. Check the mint mark. Check the condition. Check the reverse. And especially check whether there is anything unusual about the coin. Now let's move forward, because the next date, 1957, has another interesting story. And by the time we reach 1958, we will be standing at the final chapter of the wheat cent series. Now let's talk about the 1957 Lincoln wheat cent. At first it may seem almost identical to the 1953, and visually that makes sense. Lincoln remains on the obverse. The wheat ears remain on the reverse. The composition remains the familiar copper-based alloy used for wheat cents. But the collector's question is not simply, what does it look like? The collector asks, which 1957 is this? That's a much better question. There were Philadelphia and Denver issues for 1957, and the mint mark is again found beneath the date. The 1957 D was produced in very large numbers, over 1 billion. examples according to catalog references, so the date itself is not considered a rare key date. Numista. That sounds like bad news, but it isn't. Because huge mintage does not mean every surviving coin is equally desirable. This is something every new collector should understand. Imagine a coin was originally produced in enormous numbers. Millions and millions survive. But then imagine that collectors want examples with virtually no wear. Suddenly, the number of coins that actually qualify becomes much smaller. That's why condition rarity exists. A coin can be common in worn condition and surprisingly difficult to find in superb condition. This is particularly important for Lincoln cents. The 1957 issue has a wide spread in values depending on grade and color. Current references show ordinary circulated pieces at modest prices, while very high-grade examples can command much larger premiums. Coin study. So when you find a 1957 wheat cent, don't immediately ask, "Is this coin rare?" Instead ask, "How well preserved is this coin?" That question could completely change your answer. Start with Lincoln's portrait. Are the lines in the hair still sharp? Does the cheek show heavy wear? How clear is the jaw? Are the letters in Liberty strong? Is the date fully visible? Are there scratches across Lincoln's face? Are there dents? Are there dark spots? Is the surface smooth and original looking? Or has the coin been aggressively cleaned? Cleaning is another major issue. A person who finds an old penny sometimes thinks the best thing to do is make it shiny. That can be a mistake. Collectors generally prefer original surfaces. A harshly cleaned copper coin can lose collector appeal even if the coin looks brighter to the person holding it. So please remember this. Old coins do not need to shine like new coins. Sometimes the original natural appearance is exactly what collectors want. Now flip the 1957 over. Look closely at the wheat ears. Look between the lettering. Look at the rims. Look for damage. Look for unusual marks. And don't confuse damage with an error. A scratch made after the coin left the mint is not a minting error. A dent caused by another coin is not automatically an error. A flattened letter caused by circulation is not necessarily a doubled die. This distinction is critical. A genuine mint error or die variety occurs because something happened during the manufacturing process. Damage happens later. The difference can mean a lot to collectors. Now let's talk about the history of the 1957 penny. By this point, the wheat cent had already been around for almost 50 years. The design had become familiar to generations of Americans. A child in 1909 could have seen the new Lincoln cent introduced. By 1957, that same person could have been an older adult. The coin had witnessed enormous changes in American life. 2 world wars had passed. The Great Depression had passed. The economy had transformed. Technology had transformed. And the humble penny continued carrying the same basic wheat reverse. That continuity is remarkable. And 1957 was getting very close to the end. Only one regular issue wheat cent year would follow. That's where things get really interesting. But before we leave the 1957 coin, there's one more point that can make a major difference. Mint mark. If your 1957 has a D beneath the date, you have a Denver issue. If there is no mint mark, you're generally looking at a Philadelphia issue. Do not assume that one is automatically
rare simply because it has or doesn't have a mint mark.
The correct way to evaluate it is to identify the exact variety and condition. Current references show that even common 1957 D cents can move from very modest values in circulated grades to substantially higher prices in top, preservation, and color categories. Numista. That means your old penny jar deserves a second look. Maybe you have a 1957 that is worn. Maybe it is worth only a small premium. But maybe you have an unusually well-preserved example. And if you do, don't clean it. Don't polish it. Don't scratch the surface trying to test it. Don't remove anything from it. Protect it. Put it in a proper holder. And compare it with certified examples. Because the difference between an ordinary coin and a premium collector coin can sometimes be surprisingly small visually. The difference is often in details that the average person doesn't notice. That's why grading exists, and that's why serious collectors spend so much time studying coins under magnification. A tiny mark can affect grade. A tiny amount of wear can affect grade. The original color can affect desirability, and a rare variety can completely change the value. Now we reach the coin that can make this entire search especially exciting. The 1958 Lincoln wheat cent. The first thing to understand is that 1958 wasn't just another date. It was the final year of the regular Lincoln wheat reverse. After this, the wheat design would disappear, and the Lincoln Memorial reverse would begin in 1959. So every 1958 wheat cent already carries a little piece of history. But that's not the biggest reason collectors pay attention. The biggest reason is the 1958 Doubled Die Obverse, and this is where you need to slow down, because this is not the same thing as ordinary machine doubling. The genuine 1958 Doubled Die Obverse is an extraordinarily rare variety. Major numismatic references report only 3 known examples, making it one of the rarest Lincoln cent varieties of the 20th century. The doubling is visible in areas including the date, Liberty and In God We Trust, gray sheet. Think about that for a moment. 3 known examples, not 3 million, not 3,000. 3. That is the kind of rarity that changes the conversation. And one of the known examples reached an extraordinary auction result. A PCGS graded MS64. Red example sold for $336,000 in 2018, while the finest known example, graded PCGS KC MS66 Red, sold for $1,136,250 in 2023, gray sheet. Now, before you start searching your coin jar and imagining $1 million payday, we need to make something very clear. Finding the date 1958 does not mean you have $1 million penny. In fact, the overwhelming majority of 1958 wheat cents are not the famous double die variety. The extraordinary value belongs to the specific rare variety, not to every coin carrying the 1958 date. This distinction is extremely important. A normal 1958 wheat cent and an authenticated 1958 Doubled Die Obverse are completely different collecting propositions. So what should you look for? Start on the obverse. Look carefully at the date. Then examine Liberty. Then examine In God We Trust. The genuine doubled die variety shows strong, separated doubling in the affected lettering and date. This is not simply a shadow. It is not a random scratch. It is not a blurry edge caused by circulation. It is a specific die variety with recognizable characteristics. And because this variety is so rare, authentication is extremely important. If someone tells you that they have discovered a 1958 doubled die, you should not simply trust the claim. A coin that rare needs professional examination. This is one of those situations where the words, "I think I found one," are very different from "this has been authenticated." The difference is enormous. Now let's step back and appreciate the timing. The wheat cent began in 1909. For nearly 50 years, Americans used the coin in everyday commerce. And then in 1958, the story of the wheat reverse came to an end. The 1958 cent was the final regular issue wheat cent. That makes it a natural favorite among collectors. It is the closing chapter. Imagine holding one. The coin could have been sitting in someone's pocket in 1958. It could have been used to buy something. It could have passed through a cash register. It could have been stored away. It could have been forgotten. And now, decades later, it is sitting in your hand. That's what makes coin collecting so fascinating. You are not simply collecting metal. You're collecting history. Now let's discuss ordinary 1958 cents. Current pricing references show that standard 1958 wheat cents can have relatively modest values in circulated grades, while high-grade red examples can command considerably more. The exact amount depends heavily on grade, color, mint mark, and market demand. Gray sheet. So again, don't make the mistake of thinking every 1958 is rare. The normal coin can be collectible without being extremely valuable, and the rare variety can be extraordinarily valuable. That's a huge difference. Now look at the mint mark. Just as with the other coins, the mint mark is important. 80 indicates Denver. No mint mark generally indicates Philadelphia for these business strike cents. But remember something very important about the famous 1950 Doubled Die Obverse. The rare variety is associated with Philadelphia production, and reliable references identify it as a Philadelphia variety. So if someone shows you a 1958D and claims that it is the famous 1958 Doubled Die Obverse, you should immediately slow down and verify the claim. Don't accept a dramatic story without evidence. This is especially important because rare coin claims spread quickly online. People see a photograph. Someone circles a number. Someone adds a huge dollar amount. And suddenly an ordinary coin becomes an internet million-dollar penny. Real numismatics doesn't work that way. The coin needs to match the recognized variety. The condition needs to be evaluated. The surfaces need to be examined. The coin needs to be authenticated. And if the coin is genuinely extraordinary, professional certification becomes extremely important. Now let's talk about the biggest trap: machine doubling. Machine doubling can make a coin's letters appear wider or slightly shifted. It can look impressive in a photograph. But genuine doubled dies are created differently. The doubling comes from the die itself. That is why genuine doubled die varieties can show consistent, recognizable doubling on the design elements. A damaged coin can never become a genuine doubled die simply because someone sees a second-looking edge. This is why magnification and comparison are so useful. If you have a 1958 wheat cent, take clear photographs of the date. Take clear photographs of Liberty. Take clear photographs of In God We Trust. Then compare the features with trusted references. Don't rely on a random social media post, and never clean the coin before examination. If the coin is potentially valuable, cleaning can hurt its desirability and may make professional evaluation more difficult. Keep the coin exactly as you found it. Now let's imagine the most exciting possible scenario. You find a 1958 wheat cent. You look at the date. Nothing seems unusual. Then you inspect Liberty. Something looks doubled. You look at the date again. The digits appear to show unusual separation. You check In God We Trust. More doubling appears. At that moment, you don't celebrate by spending the coin. You don't take it to a random buyer and accept the first offer. You don't polish it. You don't scratch it. You don't tell everyone online that you are now a millionaire. You protect it. You document it. And you get it examined. Because if the coin really matches the recognized 1958 Doubled Die Obverse, you could be looking at something extraordinary. And that is exactly why this date deserves attention. But there's another fascinating detail. The 1958 Doubled Die Obverse is so rare that any genuine discovery outside the known examples would be extremely significant. That is the difference between a common old coin and a major numismatic discovery. The ordinary 1958 tells the story of the final wheat cent year. The genuine doubled die tells the story of a remarkable minting variety that survived for decades without being widely recognized. So now let's put the three dates side by side. All three are Lincoln wheat cents. All three feature Abraham Lincoln on the obverse. All three feature the famous wheat ears on the reverse. And all three are old enough that you should take a second look before dismissing them, but each one has a different reason for collector interest. The 1953 is a date where mint mark, condition, color, and varieties deserve attention. The 1957 is a relatively common late wheat cent, but high-grade examples can become much more desirable than worn examples. And the 1958 is historically special because it represents the final year of the wheat reverse. Then there is the extraordinary 1958 Doubled Die Obverse variety. That is where the story becomes truly remarkable. But here's the most important lesson from today's video. Never judge an old coin by its age alone, and never judge it by the date alone. A coin's value can depend on many factors: date, mint mark, variety, condition, color, strike, surface quality, authenticity, and collector demand. That means when you find a wheat cent, your first job is not to decide what it's worth. Your first job is to identify exactly what you have. That is how serious collectors think. And it is how you avoid making expensive mistakes. So if you have a jar full of old pennies, take your time. Separate the wheat cents. Check the dates. Check the mint marks. Look closely at the lettering. Look for unusual doubling. Look at the overall condition. And never clean a potentially collectible coin. Remember, the 1953 may have interesting varieties. The 1957 can reward collectors who find exceptional condition. And the 1958 has one of the most extraordinary doubled die stories in the entire Lincoln cent series. The next time someone tells you that an old penny is just 1 cent, take a closer look. Because sometimes the most interesting part of a coin isn't the number written on it, it's the story hidden inside the metal. And sometimes that story can be worth far more than 1 cent. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 1953, 1957, and 1958 Lincoln wheat cents, don't forget to check your own collection before you leave. Look under the date. Look at the mint mark. Look closely at the letters. And especially if you have a 1958, examine that obverse carefully. Because the difference between an ordinary wheat cent and an extraordinary variety can be incredibly small to the naked eye, but enormously important to a collector. So before you spend, sell, clean, or throw away an old wheat cent,